Turn your Bibles to James chapter 4. This summer, we've been walking through this great letter, the letter of James. And we're nearing the end. We have just a few more weeks in this great letter. This is known as the wisdom letter of the New Testament. Proverbs is the wisdom letter of the Old Testament. We have James, the wisdom letter of the New Testament. And James is rather clear on this, and we've been talking about the main idea of this whole book. If you're just trying to understand what is James down, if you can boil it down to one simple statement, I would boil it down to this. James says, you have faith, then prove it. Not too hard. You say you believe in Jesus, you say you're a Christian, you believe in the death, the burial, and the resurrection, then prove it. Lip service doesn't work. You can't just sit back and say, yes, I believe in Jesus, and not show it by the way you live. Some people in our culture today think that the life with Jesus is basically just a get-out-of-hell ticket. Oh, yes, I believe in Jesus, and I go live however I want to go live. But James is saying, no, if you're really a follower of God, you're really a follower of Jesus, then you're going to prove it by the way you live. And so far, we've talked about how he says you're going to prove it by persevering and obeying and loving and acting and speaking and pursuing and submitting. And all these actions are ways that we live out our faith, that we say we believe in Jesus, then I'm going to live it out. And today, I want to talk with you about trusting. If you say you have faith in Christ, then James in our text today is going to get in this idea that then I trust in God's plan and God's will and God's way. I've discovered that this life sometimes can feel like a maze of twists and turns. You guys ever heard that terminology before? That was this summer's kids camp theme. Twist and turns. That's what life sends at us. But did you know what? There's a guide. There's a source of wisdom. We don't have to deal with the twists and the turns, the ups and the downs, the unexpected things of life all by ourselves. There's wisdom, and that's what James 4 is going to be talking about with us today. Imagine you're writing your own story. I think sometimes we do that, especially when we're younger. I don't know what age, but maybe in elementary school, many kids were thinking, I'm going to be a policeman, I'm going to be a fireman, I'm going to be a school teacher. You have dreams, or I'm going to get married, I'm going to do this. And then maybe you get into high school and those things start to change a little bit. Well, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get this kind of degree and go on this kind of career. I'm going to get married at this age, I'm going to have some kids, I'm going to retire. We tend to kind of plan out our life thinking ahead. And then sometimes life's twists and turns come at us, and that whole thing changes at 15, or that whole thing changes at 25 or 35, and we're like, okay, now what's the plan? And we tend to want to rewrite the plan. James, the author, is wanting to come alongside of us. Imagine you're writing your own story and you're saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to make this much money, here's my plans. Well, James is like a big brother coming alongside and putting his arm around us and saying, okay, let's have a talk for a moment. You have some plans. I like your plans. Your plans are good. But have you stopped and consulted God on your plans? Have you asked God, what are your plans? God, what do you want for me? Or are these just all your plans? And in a loving way, like a big brother putting his arm around you going, have you paused and just said, God, what are your plans? Think of it this way. You ever plan a day to go to a park, like go to the amusement park, go up to Kings Island or go up to Cedar Point? Cedar Point's the better of the two, in my opinion. And if you like roller coasters, go to Cedar Point. But you ever plan a day to go to the park and you think, okay, this is the day we're going and we're going to get our tickets. We're all ready. And you get up and it's just a monsoon of rain. You're like, well, I'm not going to the park, am I? I'm not going on the roller coasters, that's for sure, because they're not going to run them in the middle of the rain. And everything just changes. You ever plan a vacation? You ever think, okay, I'm ready for the vacation. We're getting ready for our vacation for next year already because there's a big family reunion and it takes a whole lot of planning and organizing and everything. And we're already thinking the next year. How many of you had vacation plans in 2020 that got destroyed? Remember 2020? You all remember that year? Yeah, I mean, we all had plans, and all of a sudden said, no, you're not flying, you're not traveling, the restaurants are closed, you're not going anywhere. All the plans are changed. Life is kind of like that. Things don't always go as we plan. And James tells us that life is short. It's like a mist that appears, and then it vanishes, and it's a reminder to make the most of the time and to focus on what really matters. You might be wondering, well, how do I figure out what God wants me to do? How do we really discover that? What is God's will? What is God's plan? Well, this is where trust comes in. See, what I know is this. There are some directives that are for everybody in this room from God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and strength. Do we have a choice to say, no, I don't want to do that? We really don't have a choice. That's what God's command is. That's what God's directive. Secondly, love your neighbor as yourself. Those are the two greatest commands. That's the entire Old Testament law is summed up in two things. Love God, love people. Those are directives for all of us. But where you go to college, where you work, do you not go to college? Do you go on this vacation? Do you go on this mission trip? What ministry do you serve in? How do you care for your neighbors? Who do you marry? Who do you not marry? All these things, they look different for all of us. They all look different. And so God has very specific directive plans that apply to everybody. But then there's all these other kinds of plans that are individual to who we are in our walk with Christ. And trying to understand that, that's where trust comes in. Trust is kind of like having a GPS that knows the best way even when we don't. Does anybody in here ever go on a trip? This is what I do sometimes. I go on a trip and I think, okay, I'm traveling across whatever state or whatever town, and I've never been to it before. I'm like, well, plug it in a GPS, and I just put all my trust in GPS. Does anybody else just trust GPS? Most of us do nowadays. It used to be we'll pull out the maps. I remember the days when they were first coming out and I went on a trip with a guy. He said, I'm going to plug in my GPS. And we went and we ended up facing a field. He said, you've arrived at your destination. We're looking at a grass field. We're like, we're in the wrong place. He put it in wrong in the GPS. We put it in GPS. We got there. But that's what it is sometimes with God. Sometimes it's like, okay, God, I don't know exactly where I'm going in life, but I'm just plugging into you and you're directing it and I'm going to trust. I'm going to trust you more than I trust my GPS. I'm going to trust that you have it all figured out. It's about understanding that God's plan is kind of like a hidden treasure, so to speak, sometimes better than what we thought it could ever be ourselves. Today, I want us to learn how to kind of weave our plans in with God's plan. How do they come together? How do we embrace this venture of life? How do we walk through the twists and turns and trust that there's a grand design even when things don't go as we imagined? And I would imagine in a room with about 100 people that there's probably more than one person that says, yeah, my plans haven't gone as I dreamed. I didn't plan for the divorce. I didn't plan for the death of the early spouse. I didn't plan to have this disease. I didn't plan for this kind of sickness to hit my home. I didn't plan to lose my job. All these different kinds of plans. So open your Bibles to James chapter 4, and let's learn today about how we can merge our plans with God's plans, starting with verse 13. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. James begins by addressing those who are confidently plan out their futures without acknowledging the uncertainty of life. These individuals are so focused on their personal aspirations, their personal achievements, that they fail to recognize the sovereignty of God over their lives. Now, the word sovereignty is a big Bible word, so let me just tell you what that means. It's that we recognize His supreme power or supreme authority. Do we recognize that God is supremely in charge of all? And many times we don't. Many times we just continue on our journey, our plans, our efforts, and we forget that God has plans and desires for us. It's easy to fall in the trap of assuming that we have complete control over our destinies, forgetting that our lives are ultimately in the hands of God. And as we go about our daily lives, do we too fall into the habit of making good plans without seeking God's guidance? Are we allowing the big brother, kind of like a James, or are we allowing Jesus, by the power of His Holy Spirit, to put His arm around us and say, hey, okay, you have some plans, but where's Jesus in the mix of these? Where's God in the mix of the plans? See, do we hold our plans with open hands, in other words? Or do we hold on to them so tight? Are we ready to surrender to God's will? God, I have some plans, but I want to do it your way. Or do we clutch them tightly, placing our hopes solely in our abilities? And it's a struggle. It's kind of a tug of war, really, for all of us in our lives. The problem is not making plans. I believe God likes plans. I believe it's okay for us to make plans. I believe we could do a whole sermon series about making plans and how to make plans and why it's okay to make plans. The problem is making plans with the assumption that we have control over the plans. The problem is that we act like we have the power and we have the control. We act like we're in charge of our lives. The problem is that we act like we have power over the outcome of life. And do we realize we don't have that power? We're not in charge of life. God's in charge of life. James tells us that you do not have this power. You don't have this control. You're not in charge. And then he continues on to verse 14. Why? You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. James reminds us of the brevity, the shortness of life, our time on this earth. He compares it to a fleeting mist. Stop and think about that. Our time on this earth is a snap. Yes, I just saw the other day the latest stats. The average man lives to be 78 years old. The average woman lives to be 82 years old. So it's increased a little bit over the last few years, probably because of medical technology. They can keep us living longer and longer. But that 78, that 82 years, or if you're blessed beyond that, it's just a snap of life. I mean, for eternity, if you say eternity begins somewhere back here and it ends where it never ends, it goes on and on and on and on and on and on, and eternity goes on forever. We're just right here in this middle, and James says, you're just a mist. That's your life. And we think we have control of it. We think we have it all under control. Our time on earth is fleeting. The reality actually should humble us and make us realize that the insignificance of our plans when compared to the grandeur of God's eternal plan from when He created the heavens and the earth into eternity. It's easy to become entangled with this pursuit of worldly stuff, isn't it? All the worldly stuff that flashes before us, have the house, have the car, have the careers, have the money, and then we get so entangled with that. But what truly matters is the state of our souls and our relationship with the Creator. I've never been on someone's deathbed. I've never been to the hospital when someone's dying and they're concerned about my house. They're concerned about my car. They're concerned about my investment. You know what they're concerned about? They're concerned about their family that's around, and usually they're concerned about their walk with God. They're concerned about the relationship. James wants us to see what life is. And so he asks the question, what is your life? Now, we might have a lot of answers to this question. Look how James answers the question. He says, for you are a mist that appears a little time and then vanishes. In other words, James is telling us life is short. We're not going to live on this planet forever. What is life? Our body's not created to be permanent. We are to live with the understanding that you cannot assume you have tomorrow. Any of us. It could be today the Lord calls us home. Could be tomorrow. Could be this week. We need to take advantage of today. Today. What does James want us to do? How should we then approach the ambitions and the plans of life? Should we abandon them altogether? Not necessarily. I don't think he's saying throw them all out. Instead, we must cultivate a perspective that acknowledges this transient nature of life, that life is short, that life is a mist, and the importance of lining then our desires with God's plan and God's purpose. Are we really wanting to know what God's plan and purpose? And so he tells us then in verse 15 what to do. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. Now, if you've grown up in church, you've probably heard a teaching about the Lord's will at some point. You've probably even heard it in public prayers where people will pray about something and they'll just kind of tag on at the end, if it's the Lord's will. And then sometimes it's just a slogan when we're talking with somebody. We'll be saying, well, I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be doing this, God willing. And it's almost like a slogan that we tag on at the end, like, I'm doing all this stuff as long as God keeps me alive, is almost our mindset. But that's not what James is saying here. James is really kind of leaning into the fact, listen, as believers, as people of faith, people who say, I believe in Jesus, I'm going to trust you so much that I'm going to seek your will, I'm going to seek your plans, I'm going to seek your directives, I want to discover what they are, and then that's where I'll go, and that's what I will do, and that will direct and even dictate my plans. You say, well, is that real in Scripture? Think about the Apostle Paul. Let me just give you a couple examples. In Acts 18, it says, but as he left, he promised, I will come back, what does it say? If it is God's will. He didn't say, I'll come back if I want to. He didn't say, yes, I'm putting that on the calendar and I'll be here in January. He set sail for Ephesus. Ephesus, he was there in a synagogue with the Jews, and he's teaching them about the ways of Jesus and even debating some of them. And they're like, stay a little longer, Paul. Stay. You got to stick with us. Stick with us. He's like, sorry, because God's will is moving me on to somewhere else. But I will come back if it's God's will. 1 Corinthians, but I will come to you very soon if the Lord is willing. And then I will find out not only how these arrogant people are talking, but what power they have. He writes to the church in Corinth and he tells them, listen, I want to come visit you. I want to spend time with you, church, but only if the Lord is willing, if God directs my steps and my paths to go that way. In Romans 1, he writes this, in my prayers at all times, and I pray now that at last by God's will, the way may be open for me to come to you. Saying to Christians in Rome, I want to come to you. Only if it is God's will. Only if it's his plan. So Paul had plans and Paul had objectives, but all those plans and all those objectives sat underneath the umbrella of God's will. If it's not God's will, I'm not doing it. These are just a few examples that we see in Paul's life. We could have spent 10, 15, 20 minutes just looking at Scripture of Paul, just saying when it's God's will, when it's God's will. And what we know from the Apostle Paul, he had written over half the New Testament. He's one reason why we have what we have in our Bible today. And then you look at the life of Jesus. And you probably remember the scene where Jesus is about to be arrested. And Jesus is going to be arrested. Here's what he says, yet not as I will, but as you will. Not Jesus. Even Jesus in his humanness says, it's not my plan, it's God Almighty's plan. It's my dad's plan. And I'm going to follow his plan, not my will. And then we know later after he's arrested, praying in the garden, he says, I don't want to do about this way. I don't want to die. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to go through the hardships. And then he says, but Dad, if this is your plan, I want to do your plan. I'll follow your way. If it's the Lord's will. So it's not just a phrase, but it's meant to be a constant way of thinking for Christians. It's meant to be an ongoing way we are directed and guided in life. The Christian understands that everything in life is by the will of God and by the power of God. Look carefully now what James says. Go back to verse 15 for me again. There you go. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. What's a this or that? Go shopping, go on a trip, get this job, have this business, go to this college, go to the mission field, go to become a preacher, go to become a youth minister, a worship leader, serve in the nursery, help with the preschool, work with the teenagers, all that stuff. We're going to go have fun, going to go out to eat. He said, if it's the Lord's will, then we will do this or that. It is only by the Lord's will that you and I are living today. We don't have power over that. We know that we do not have power over that. We know we don't choose our time to walk out of this world. Have you ever tried to exert your own power over your life? Let me give you an example of this. You ever try to change your breathing? Like, I'm going to slow my breathing way down. Try it. Just, I'm going to slow it down. Slow it down. I'm going to speed it up. You start getting messed up. You start really thinking about your breathing gets out. You're like, okay, this feels weird. And you know why you don't have control of your breathing? And you know you don't have control of your breathing? When you go to sleep at night, do you think, okay, breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. You can't do it. You go to sleep at night and you keep breathing as long as the Lord wills. Because he's created our body in that way that the body would keep breathing. You're not thinking, I got to breathe now. Oh no, I got to breathe more. Can you make your heart take the next beat? You can't go, okay, heartbeat. Okay, it's out of rhythm. Let me get it back in rhythm. We have no control over that kind of thing. Our heart just keeps beating. Now, every now and then it gets out of rhythm. And what happens? We go to the doctor and they try to get it back into rhythm. But the heart beats on its own because it's the Lord's will. It's only the Lord's will that makes our heart beat and makes us breathe. Don't miss this. If it's the Lord's will, we will do this or that as long as we are alive. 2020, the year of COVID. Remember that year? Want to go back? No. Nobody wants to go. But every now and then we're reminded. Every now and then you go in a store or place and you see someone wearing a mask. You're like, oh yeah, COVID. Every now and then we're reminded when we see a news report on the television. Every now and then we're reminded a study that comes out. Well, what's the effect of masks that was on children that were supposed to be in school? Just heard one yesterday talking about facial expressions. All the kids who went that long wearing masks and didn't get a chance to see facial expressions. What's that going to do to children? Every now and then, God completely reset our lives so that we would really understand that we have no control over tomorrow. Have we forgotten? I wonder sometimes, have we forgotten what happened in 2020? How everything was turned upside down, flipped upside down, and what we knew as normal was no longer normal? Now, I hope we can appreciate life more completely by the will of God. See, if it's the Lord's will, I'll take a vacation next year that we're starting to plan now, but I'll hold it loosely because things could change. If it's the Lord's will, we'll continue to have wealth. If it's the Lord's will, we'll be able to carry out whatever plan we make. That's the attitude that God wants from us. He wants us to have this attitude that I want it to be in your will. When we act like we're sovereign over our own lives, like we're in control of our lives, then we start to lack humility. When we think we have control and we have power, we start to lose our humility. Humility realizes that we do not have power over the next breath that we take. And humility realizes that only God will allow any plan we make to come to pass. How many times are we walking in life with plans that are just our plans versus God's plans? Saying if the Lord wills was not meant to be a tag-on type statement. Like, oh yeah, if the Lord wills, as long as I'm alive. Sometimes that phrase was used that way. As long as I'm alive, as long as God allows me to keep going, then I'll be able to do this. But that's not the point, because God can wreck our plans at any moment. All the plans can change. Think about how God wrecked the plans of Joseph. Joseph had great plans. He didn't have plans to be taken by his brothers and be put in a pit by his brothers, then eventually be put into jail and then eventually rise to leadership. That wasn't in his plans. He never wrote that out, but that was God's plans, and God used Joseph in a mighty way. We're not sovereign over our lives. God is sovereign. God's in control of everything. We are doing what we are doing if God allows it. This verse is trying to get us to realize and accept our complete dependence on God, that if you have faith, you release, God, I trust you. Trust you 100%, no matter what happens. We see the point strongly made by James in verse 16. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, all such boasting is evil. What does James mean when he tells us we're boasting in our arrogance? We boast in our arrogance. We think, well, I have the power to carry out my plans. We boast in our arrogance when we think that we have the power over our lives. We boast in our arrogance when we think that we can dictate the terms of our lives and that we have it all under control. And Jesus gives a warning, this kind of thinking, with the parable of the rich fool in Luke 12. Look at the text. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I'll store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, get that. He didn't say, and I'll ask God, what do you want? No, I'll say to myself, I'm in charge of my life. You have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. In other words, the mindset of this rich man was, I've got it all under control. I know what I'm doing. I've got all my plans. He thinks too much of his own power and his own ability, therefore arrogantly makes plans. And notice what Jesus says next. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? Oh, you got all these plans. You're going to deal with all your riches and all your stuff. And well, God's going to take your life tonight. And all this hard work, what's going to happen to all your grain, all your stuff? What's going to happen to it? Because are you really seeking God? He thought he had control over his life and his plans, but he's completely wrong. And pride thinks that our actions are independent of God and independent of his power. We think too much of our power, making our plans arrogantly. It was James is telling us. And so James has given us a great caution here, church. If you're making all your plans, you think you got it all figured out, and you're leaving God out of it, That's the epitome of arrogance. All plans are to be made with the recognition that such a plan can only happen because God allows it to happen. Whether you're rich or whether you're poor, whether you're somewhere in the middle, what plans are you making? Are they really laid out before God and worked through with God? And then James concludes with this potent truth of verse 17. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is a sin. See, if we're aware of God's will and we choose to ignore it in favor of our own desires and our own plans, then we're sinning against God's plan. Like I said earlier, we very clearly know God, love people. That's for everybody. But when God is telling you, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, I want you to go here, I want you to participate in this, and we go, well, I'm not really sure I want to do that. Well, then we're sinning. We also know the difference between sin like lying and stealing and cheating and adultery, and the list goes on. We go, okay, we know those. I look across this room, I would guess, hopefully we don't have too many of those going on. But look across this room. How many of us are being obedient to where God's saying, here's where I want you to go. Here's what I want you to do. Here's the plans for you. You know, I hear sometimes from people that are in their working season of life, man, I'm going to serve God, but I'm going to do that later. Well, like when I get to retirement, I have more time. I don't know. Is that God's will? Is that what God's telling you? I don't think so. From my understanding of Scripture, I think God would be telling you, no, you got to have your place of service. You got to have your place of ministry. I also heard from the other side where people get older and they hit the retirement years and they're like, oh, you know what? I did all my serving. I'm now on cruise control. I get a chance to relax. It's somebody else's turn to do all that ministry stuff. You know, some of the best years of ministry are when you are retired because you do have more time. But so many times people say, well, it's my season now. Is that God's plan or is that your plan? And what James is telling us, when you're walking and you know God has a plan, he says, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. And you say, I'm not going to do that because I've got my plans I'm working on. I've got my work to do. I've got this to work on. Then you're entering into the season of sin. So how do we do this? How do we develop a trusting faith? Let me just give you real quick 5 actions I think you can apply, we can apply to our lives to help develop this idea of a trusting faith. 1, you got to cultivate humility. We got to approach our plans, our aspirations with humility, recognizing our lives are but a small part of God's grand design. In other words, humility opens the door to God's guidance and wisdom. God, I'm working on some plans. I think this is where you want me to go. This is what I'm praying about. God, this is what I'm hearing from you. And so this is the direction I'm going. But God, I humbly sit before you. And if you're redirecting and you have something else for me, I'm willing to go. I'm willing to go the direction you want me to go. Secondly, seek God's will. As you make plans, let's take time to seek God's will through prayer and reflection. This is why it's so important to have regular Bible time in your life, why it's so important to have prayer in your life, so that you invite Him into your decision-making process and be willing to adjust your plans according to His leading. Somebody asked me not long ago, when we planted a church 19 years ago, said, Brian, how did you know that God wanted you to plant a church? Well, that was a hard thing to decipher and hard to figure out. And one of my counselors in my life said, you need to put together a decision plan. And so we wrote out a decision plan, like how do we involve God in making a good decision, a good plan? I was seeking God's will. God, do you want me to plant a church? Do you not want me to plant a church? And some of you maybe are going through some big decisions. You're like, how do I know this? Love to share with you my decision plan that walk through. How do you walk through that? God, I want you to direct. Thirdly, embrace flexibility. In other words, hold plans with open hands. When circumstances change or doors close, trust that God's sovereign plan is at work. You have the best job in the world right now, the job you've always looked for, making the income you want, and tomorrow you go in and they say, hey, we're closing our doors. Or you no longer have a position. Sometimes we hold that so tight that wrecks us. Versus, okay, I'm in a great job right now. I think I'm in a great place. I think I'm right within God's hands, right within God's will. I'm loving people. If that door closes, okay, God, that door closed. Now, what's next? So we're going to embrace the flexibility because in God's world, God's economy, things will move and things will change. Prioritize the eternal. While it's not wrong to pursue success or it's not wrong to pursue prosperity, let's prioritize eternal values over temporary gains. In other words, invest in relationships, invest in acts of service and spiritual growth that have a lasting significance. Whatever you're doing with your life, you're like, okay, how's this going to impact someone for the kingdom? How's it going to impact their eternity? And so you may be pursuing plans that are of grandiose plans. That's fine. Make sure God's in the middle of those plans. Lastly, live in obedience. To sin by omission is just as detrimental as sin by commission. Actively live in obedience to God's revealed will. In other words, trusting that His ways are higher and better than our own. So when God reveals to you and says, hey, I want you to change this job. Hey, I want you to serve in this ministry. I want you to go volunteer with this ministry. And you keep hearing those kind of things from God over and over. You say, okay, I'm going to be obedient. That's what James 4:17 is. It's an obedient passage that ties right back to James 1:22. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. And he's coming right back here and saying, okay, now you know the good you ought to do. You better go do it. If you're not doing it, then you're walking in sin. And so we have to have this relationship with God where we're listening and we're seeking and we're trying to understand where He's guiding and directing. The wisdom of James 4 teaches us that surrendering our plans to God is not a sign of weakness. That's what our culture will tell us. Oh, you need God, you're weak. And you say, yeah, I am. Yeah, I need God because God's a lot wiser. But it's not a sign of weakness, but of profound trust and faith. When you release plans and say, God, you're in charge, what you're doing is saying, God, I have great faith in you. It's an acknowledgement that God's ways are higher. His plans are better. His love is immeasurable. As we navigate the twist and the turns of life, I think we need to learn to surrender our will to God's will. Find joy and peace. And, may I suggest, perfect guidance for walking through this life. Let's pray together.